Yeah.
Thanks, Crystal. I'm Karen. I'm an alcoholic. Um, I met Chris in 2015 when I came back to AA for the third time, which happens to be the time that I stayed. Um, and it's an honor to be able to introduce him today because he's not just a friend, but I believe a vital part of the reason that I was able to get continuous sobriety this last time. I was pretty newly sober when I had a conversation with Chris outside of the noon group, I believe. My memory serves me. And he and I had a conversation that we both shared a love for trivia. And we started organizing an AA trivia group. And I did that for probably the first 3 or 4 years. We did that weekly. And what it taught me was that my life wasn't over, that I could still have fun in sobriety. Not only did a group of us, many of us were in the group, but we had 12 players every week, sitting at a table, not necessarily recommended, of course, but in a bar where we were able to not worry about drinking alcohol. And we were also able to always place in the top three because we were smart and sober. But being able to hang out with alcoholics in a bar for me that first year, and knowing that I didn't need to have a drink, being protected in a herd of other alcoholics that wanted to be sober, was something I needed for my sobriety, and I'm forever grateful for. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
All right, thanks. Full house. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris. I'm an alcoholic. I'm here not just to share my story, but to correct a grave injustice the last time I spoke. I just kind of lost track of time, and the next thing I knew, there were like 10 minutes left, and I hadn't quite gotten to what happened and what it's like now. I'd just been blathering about the bad old days, and Seth gets up and, yeah, no, Seth, no. I've got to say a couple things at least about how great it is to be sober. So they skipped the closing readings and just said, well, see you later, everyone. Time management will be more accurate this time. At 20 after, I will be done with the problem. Ish. So born to a family of alcoholics. Pretty much if you have a Y chromosome in my family, you're an alcoholic. But funny thing, when everyone's an alcoholic, you can't really trace the family history back all that far. So as far as we know, alcoholics, but after a few generations, it's just all lost. And so it's kind of funny when you come into this program, you look at your family, you see a lot of darkness, but then things kind of change as you stay, and you realize that these flawed human beings did their best. My dad, selfish, alcoholic, self-centered, did not beat me or my sister, and he was an abused child himself. And for those of you, who have looked into this at all, that is a very hard cycle to break. So thanks, Dad. You did give me that gift. My mom also did her best with her issues, which were numerous. But, I made it through my early education in relatively good shape. A lot of perfectionism, a lot of depending on school and academics for validation, because that was the one place that I, was safely, treated. And then also a lot of reading, because that was a place where, I could not be hassled if I have my face in a book. So I learned to not feel all that much. I learned to spout the feelings of others. And I got pretty good at that during my alcoholic time. And unfortunately, my memory was a lot better back then. So I have all sorts of dark and unpleasant things memorized in here. And now that I'm a different person with a bad memory, I'd like to fill that space with something else, but no, I've still got all that. I'd go through them, I'd like to say things like, the ways of the Lord are often dark, but never pleasant. That was a good one. And as long as I get mine and a little bit of yours, I thought that was pretty cool. And your no is always stronger than your yes. Where did I pick up these things? I don't know. But those were the mantras I lived by in my drinking days. I had my first serious accident at 15. I wasn't drinking yet. I was crossing the street. My best friend, call him my brother, we've been so close since second grade, had just committed suicide. So I was a bit distraught, crossed the street on my way to basketball practice. Clearly, I wasn't coordinated enough to play basketball if I couldn't avoid a car, but hit by the car, woke up in the hospital. That was the first of 3 anterior grade amnesia incidents. My head's been battered around pretty good. I'm very glad to be here and speaking coherently to you guys. When some odd stuff started happening to me, I went to, seek help, and they said, you have a mild, okay, it starts with mild neurological whatever, is the diagnosis. And you think I'd remember, but anyway, and I'm like, mild, my memory's worse, I'm doing this. Well, yeah, but you still, can complete sentences, you can walk, you're doing pretty well considering. But so, the really heavy drinking started when I changed high schools. It was also a great image change for me. I went from, let's call it a Clark Kent to Superman transition. I went from glasses and, well, I guess just glasses. I got contacts. Anyway, bam! This is how I arrived at my new high school. And oh man, I just felt so different and so powerful, And I immediately got into a drinking crowd. And I still remember that first drink. And I guess the only thing I can liken it to in the revolution it made instantly in my life is the birth of my first child. I knew that things would not be the same after this. I guess they call it an allergy. For me, it was like an enzyme or a catalyst, I was Chris, dull old Chris, Chris who goes through life and completes his assignments and does this and does that. But then I had alcohol, and I was Chris plus. I was Chris energized. I was Chris powerful. And I knew after that first day, things were not going to be the same. Oddly enough, I also had my first kiss that day. I also had my first 10-plus-mile walk, as I decided after being intoxicated, I'm going to walk to grandma's, which was like 15 miles away. So off I went. And, well, grandma was pretty surprised to see me at 6 in the morning or whatever it was that I got there. But, yeah. And drinking went on all through college, all through relationships. I did marry as an extreme alcoholic, and to a woman who was all right with that. We had our good old times for the first 5 years. My ex was from Brazil, so oh man, not only the excitement of having some kids, but also living in a whole new culture and the first 5 years of our relationship were actually pretty awesome. I mean, I, for the person I was then, it was the best I'd ever done, you know? A lot of drinking, a lot of partying. The kids were, there to enjoy. They were growing. And yeah, I was still pleased with being an alcoholic. 19 after. All right. We move on to what happened. So after the first 5 years, I have these kids that I love, and my life is no, it is still centered around alcohol, I have to admit it. But now there's another planetary force that's like drawing some of the gravity off of alcohol, you know? I have to remember one time my son had a appendectomy and we were taking turns sitting with him. I went with a bag of things to entertain him. Guess what was actually in the bag? Beer. My father-in-law caught me, and that was the first time he'd ever really spoken that severely to me. Like, what the hell's wrong with you, man? And I actually responded. I wanted to respond with my usual anger and, hey, this is my life. I'm not hurting anybody. But I was in kind of a different state. And I said, you're right. I don't like living like this anymore. It disgusts me that I'm living like this. I look in the mirror and I think to myself, I'm in hell and I'm living in a foreign country. I'm not working. I have kids who adore me. Hell, I'm not injured. I'm, mentally competent. And so I decided I would try AA while I was in Brazil. Well, I'd tried it earlier, through DUIs, but I thought I would try Brazilian style AA. So I I go to the church and there's several church people who are, saying, "Oh, it's good to have an American here, and you've been to AA? Oh, that's awesome, because we're just kind of making this up as we go along, we're just kind of reading from the book, and we're giving these, homeless drunk folks a meal, and maybe you could help us." Guess what I said? Oh man. I said, "Well, I'm here to get sober myself." I didn't know. I didn't know. And so I left, and there went my chance to help an AA meeting in Brazil get started. And I lived in selfishness for a lot longer. It just kept getting worse though, the first 5 years of my relationship I would call great for the person I was then. The next five, average, the last five, hellish. And there I was with my kids, and the last couple years I would do what I call now my vaccination program of AA. I would go to AA quite a bit, taper off, and then be like, okay, I'm good. 90 meetings in 90 days. Well, I did like, I don't know, I did 50. And so, but it's been 90 days, so I'm done. And so I would then not go to meetings for a couple months and then relapse. And the cycle was about 9 months. So I had a bunch of stillborn AA babies, unfortunately, in my own recovery. But then we came to late August 2012. I can't remember exactly what my sobriety date is, and I kind of like it that way. I can just have it on a Saturday or whatever day is convenient on that week. I had just taken the kids to Glacier, and I was going to use alcohol as a tool because alcohol had really served me over the years. It was quite a good servant to me. It would do what I said, right? And I was going to drink just enough in front of the kids to get them to report to their mom, who was then going to divorce me because I didn't want to initiate it. So I figured that would be best. Well, I got arrested in my underwear at Bowman Lake in Glacier, taken to Flathead lockup, and my ex had to come get the kids, go back. It was firmly established then that divorcing would happen. And I she didn't I called her and called her. She never called back. So I had to go to Glacier first to make sure they weren't still there. Of course, the campsite is empty. Then I took the bus back to Missoula, and I walked from the bus station to the area between Missoula and East Missoula, thinking and thinking. And I'd like to say that was when I stopped. Wouldn't that be great to say? And that was the last time I drank. But I had to do it a couple more times. So I did. And the very last time I drank would have been kind of an ideal drinking day for me if I was still living by my old standards. You know, a lot of things went the way I liked a perfect drinking day to go. But at the end of the day, I felt like I had sand in my mouth. You know, I felt like, okay, I've done this. It's all gone the way I want it to go. And it sucks. I never had that experience people talk about of drinking and it not working. It always worked. It always made me not self, you know? That was what I was going for. But it also almost was, this is better than being sober. But then that last day, I did not say this is better than being sober. After that, I started we already had a plan for my kids and ex to go to Brazil for months. We did that every now and then to keep like the Portuguese language alive in the kids. So I had a couple months, and then, you know, guess what I was planning on doing with those few months? I was really gonna have some fun. I was gonna, you know, maybe get a fancy bottle of something rather than the cheapest one that I usually do, because, you know, after the first one, it doesn't really matter. They all go down just the same for me. But instead, a lot of AA meetings, a lot of meetings. And I went to a couple meetings a day. I went through a few sponsors in pretty short order. Um, it was an interesting time. I met three good friends. Two of them aren't alive anymore. Math is hard for me. Four good friends. Uh, there was Howie and Clayton. Uh, Howie, I was pleased to meet. He was really a charming guy that people just fell in love with, but unfortunately, he couldn't fall in love with himself. And then there was Clayton, who did so much for this program, started Young Guns at night and sponsored so many people. I was actually in treatment with him years before for my last DUI, where my daughter was in the car and I could have gotten child endangerment. And I was at the carousel and I was so drunk, I was actually trying to steal the Christmas ornaments and put them in my coat at the carousel. And I actually, even after being arrested, somehow they failed to get one from me. So I still have that one, and I'm not returning it to the carousel. This is a reminder to me. It's a bunch of bells on a ring. And I tell the story every year to the kids. I break it out. Do you remember? You remember where I got this? Anyway, uh, so I wanted to meet with Clayton to see like what he'd done. Because when I met him, as Mr. T said, I pitied the fool. He was just ridiculous, just ridiculous. All he could do was talk about his girlfriend and how she'd done him wrong. And now he's an AA guru, and he's, you know, being looked to by everybody for wisdom, and actually pretty damn wise. I heard him talk at meetings. So I sat with him at the cafe and said, excellent, excellent. You're going to tell me the secret, because clearly you had learned the secret. So just tell me, you know, the secret. And he said, well, are you ready? Go to meetings, be involved in the community, read the book, sponsor people. And I'm waiting for this to, you know, for the secret. And I'm like, come on, Clayton, everyone knows that. Like, really, what'd you do? He said, really? That's what I did. And I wasn't ready to receive that message quite yet. I didn't want to drink, and I was going to meetings. And there was kind of an odd meeting. I'm not sure if it's going on still at the press box, where people would have breakfast in the morning, and you weren't really limited to AA. People could also talk about work, and they did a lot. And I wasn't working at the time, so I wasn't that into it, but the time was convenient. And so I went to that, and we were all standing outside after that. And I had formed, for the last time in my life up to this moment, a firm conviction to drink. I'd said to myself, well, I've been sober a month. Kids and ex have been gone, and the place is still so damn messy. It's trashed, because you can't clean when you're sober. I mean, you know, clearly it's going to stay dirty until I drink. So I'm gonna go to Albertsons on my way home. I'm just gonna get a 12-pack, just a 12-pack. That's about the right amount for cleaning a place, you know? And I remember another time when I had just met some people, and they were saying, let's go by the river and have some beers, and we could swim in the river a little bit. I said, oh boy. And we all went to the gas station together that isn't there anymore, on Orange and Front. And I got a 12-pack, and they said, oh, do you think we're going to need all that? And I'm like, what? This is for me. If you guys want some, you need to buy your own, you know. After I have a few, I don't share well. I don't really play well either. But so there I was. I was actually going to go to that grocery store. The decision was firm, and I was going to clean. Yeah, you know how it goes. Maybe you clean an hour, and then you're a different person. I like to say you. So there I was, but I didn't want these damn AA people to see, you know, because the press box is there, Albertsons is there. By some miracle of vision, they could have seen me walking out with the 12-pack. So I'm like, hey, yeah, let's just talk and be friends out here, guys. I just like you all. And so they just keep talking and talking, and I'm tapping my foot and glaring at them. I'm like, I think it's time to go. Let's all go home. But then the miracle happened, and I didn't think of it as a miracle or as divine grace or whatever until I told the story to people, and a couple had said that, and I realized, you know, perhaps that was a miracle. I, who had every time in his life that he had formed that notion to drink, had drank, unless an officer or something like that interfered. That day, I felt something come over me, a feeling. I can only compare it to those fighting video games, you know, where your character is fighting and he has a little bar that, like, suddenly he's all blue or some color. And I felt like I was blue. I felt like something had just filled my body. And I felt like a power, like those characters in the fighting games, you know? And I straightened my back and I said, you know what? I won't. I'm going to go home and clean, sober. I'm going to put on music. I'm going to dance if I feel like it. I'm going to make cleaning fun. And that was really the last time in my life I had formed the intention to drink. And then, you know, it never happened again. There was one very odd circumstance I was in where I was in this situation, just like, again, like I liked to be in back in my drinking days, and I was offered a beer. And suddenly it was as if, like, all of my senses turned off other than my mind. And I was just kind of ripping through, well, if I'm ever going to drink, this is the time. but no, don't be silly. And I kind of went back and forth on that. And the next thing I knew, I came to myself and I was like standing in the corner, looking at the corner. I like hadn't noticed what my body had been doing all that time, while my mind was wildly debating, am I going to drink? And I turned away from the corner and everyone's looking at me kind of like the corner, buddy? And I was like, no, no drinks for me. Thanks. Okay, let's see what happened. I guess it really started to flow when I got my first sponsor, which is Serenity Rich. I really liked Rich. He didn't present himself as a guru or as someone who had all the answers. He presented himself as somebody who was still struggling, who was still looking and seeking, and who was still learning, you know, and I liked that. And so we got together and he was my sponsor for years, and we actually did the steps slowly, with calculation, with a nice long process, with a lot of thought and care, you know? And there's that phrase about no one likes the self seeking and the internal searching or whatever. I don't remember how it goes. But I actually really did like it because it was kind of a foreign realm to me, you know, like the laboratory that I always worked in, and my first degree was in chemistry, was always very cold and very external and logical. And I learned that as a young kid, you know, respond well on the tests, you get the reward, you know, don't worry about all that internal stuff. I was one of the people who had to look at the list of emotions to see what emotion I was feeling, you know? Yeah, I guess I feel that, you know, and so I would go through those. But we went through step one and I'd already kind of gotten to that point. One thing that I'd heard in a meeting that seems so obvious now, but at the time was like the break of dawn, was, well, nobody puts down a diabetic for taking their insulin. And I was like, holy shit, that's right. And this is the medicine. This works. I know when I go to these meetings, I don't drink. And I guess I have these epiphany moments. When I first got sober, I got a little black book and I wrote things in it. Terminal uniqueness in bold letters and underlined. For the first time, I heard that. And for a while, when people had a sobriety birthday, I would say, here's a little black book for you. It did me a lot of good when I was first getting sober. Of course, now people would say, I have a phone, dude. But back then it worked well. It's kind of funny how things work and evolve for you, you know? So many things that worked for me now would be impossible. You know, the life that I lived then, it seemed natural and healthy. Actually healthy, you know? But more about the steps. I really struggled with that higher power thing, and when I first tried to get sober in Missoula in, I think, 02, I decided, make a higher power of your understanding. All right, I'm going to make one. And so I did a little research into theology and religion, and I decided I'm going to be a phenomenological, eupanishotic monist. The acronym is PUM. So eventually I will have my own organization, the PUMs. You know, I didn't think small back then. But the funny thing is, when you thought about my higher power, I guess I was seeing it in a mirror, you know? Then when I came in this last time, I didn't want to define anything. I didn't want to create anything. I wanted to be connected to something. I wanted to not be it all the time. It gets kind of tiresome playing tag when you're always it, you know? If I had no one to refer to ever, where else can I go? And I guess some people say I found the doorknob as my whatever nonsense they say, the chair, it can hold my weight or something. But for me, I'm sorry. If that's your truth, I shouldn't deride it. But for me, it did start as the group. You know, the group could do something for me that I could not do for myself. It could get me sober. It could provide me with wisdom that is completely foreign to me. But then when I try it, I see, I just wow. You know, it's hard to remember those things now, what they were. There was a certain bearded, hatted gentleman leaning against the wall there. I guess the wall is his higher power supporting him. And he told me something in a meeting once that and he phrased it in the right way. You know, some people know how to say things so that you'll understand. He said, I know you probably won't try this, but if you want to give it a shot, try praying for them. Pray for them 10 days in a row. Pray for what you would like them to receive to make them healthy and see what happens. And this is referring to my ex-wife. You know, I was a year sober or something, still had a lot of resentments. And I said, the guy doesn't know what he's talking about, but what the hell? I'll try it. It didn't take 10. It took about 3. And after about 3 prayer sessions, something was different. I'm like, what the hell? Is this real? I want more of these tricks. Show me some more AA tricks. Because when I first came to AA, I didn't want tools. I wanted weapons. I wanted to be more efficient, sober, and like squeeze more out of the situation because I'm actually sober than I could when I'm drinking. But I didn't really want to do it when I was sober. So, you know, it was kind of a conundrum for me. But there's a lot of those things. I really should have a notepad because as I make these discoveries, I forget them. You know, I wouldn't have even mentioned that probably had Troy not been standing there. Let's see, there's someone right in front of me, you know, right in the back there by the window. And I was agonizing about something about, I can't believe I did this. Like it was really bothering me, like serious head in the hands stuff. Oh, how could I have acted that way? And at this point, I've completely forgotten what it was. I have no idea what it was, but I do remember what Don said to me, which is 3 words. Again, math is hard. 4 words. Do better next time. Now that's easy, isn't it? You know, and I've heard that before in my life. But at that moment, I was ready to hear those words as I'd never been before. I was ready to make that part of my life and my journey, you know? And that's what I really like about coming to AA is that journey just keeps getting more beautiful and more profound as I travel it. And let's be honest, I'm far less capable to travel it than I've ever been in my life. I have cognitive issues, I have back issues, gray hair. Yet I'm far happier now and can face this world so much better than I ever could before. When my cognitive issues first started, I was a few years sober. And they're not so bad, really. Just I used to perform and think on a very high level, and now I don't. Oh, well, you know, so it goes. But at the time, it was really crushing to me. And I thought to myself, really? Am I going to become not self? A self that I finally appreciate and love is emerging through sobriety. And now I'm going to lose that. I'm not going to live long. I'm going to have Alzheimer's. And, you know, it was a very hard time. And a thought came to my head, a very useful thought. I said, you know what? This stuff wasn't happening when I was drinking. I bet if I just started drinking again, everything would be fine. I will use the therapeutic value of alcohol, and I will become the person I was again. The memory will return. You know, all will be well. I'll be able to do math in my head again, you know. And I really played with that idea for a while, but again, I never formed the resolution to drink. I had learned enough in this program to know that when I am down, when I'm struggling, there's going to be a part of me that it will never be extinguished, that's going to reach up the torch and say, hey, remember me? If you only drank, this would be all better. But luckily, I had been sober long enough to get through that, because I knew what to do. By that point, I had a caring group of friends. Caring, like Kara. She was annoyed with me at first when I kept forgetting appointments. And then I kind of bared my heart to her and said, oh, Kara, I'm sorry, you know, but here's what it is. And she was super supportive and kind. And I pretty much told, after that experience, I think she was the only one with guts enough to say, hey, man, I don't like it that you keep missing our appointments. It kind of strains our friendship. Other people were, you know, just quieter, I guess. And so then I was able to tell other people, sorry, Kara, I meant less in touch with how to create a friendship. That's what I meant to say. But I I talked to my other friends, and that was really the first time in my life, other than in, you know, first getting sober and having this group of supportive people, that I realized what a supportive group of friends can do when you're really struggling. And now I have what I call the, okay, math is hard. I think it's the 4-point plan, which if I'm ever feeling really down and I really need some help, there's calling a friend, exercising, going out in nature, or all of the above. So that's 4. Yeah. And those work for me. I do add to my toolbox, my tricks all the time. And luckily lately, I haven't been struggling all that much. My road has been pretty clear. I had my first years sober and decided, like so many of us do, I like this. I want to do it forever. Let's be an addiction counselor. So I went to study addiction counseling, but that's when my memory issues started. So I'm like, well, an addiction counselor can't be very effective if he has a bad memory. So I kind of dropped that. But I stayed in the loop, you might say. I still worked at Western Montana Mental Health, and, you know, got into that world of caring, of engagement in your community. And I've got to say, now I've never been more satisfied in my life than I am now. I was with a group of people, and we were talking about, what would you like to see your life like in 5 years? And I could honestly answer, more of the same, you know? I've never felt more satisfied, gratified, gladified than I am now in my existence. My skin fits just right. I still remember that Donnie Darko saying, where Donnie says to the rabbit, why are you wearing that bunny suit? And the rabbit replies, why are you wearing that human suit? And that's how I felt my entire life. I'm wearing a suit that doesn't fit. I'm in a world that's not right for me. There's a poem, Miniver Cheevy, that I'm sure some of you could quote, but it talks about how the guy loved the days when suits were iron, and, you know, how he loved those medieval days. And I was reading this poem, I'm like, yeah, yeah. And then the last line was, and went on drinking. I was like, oh. But that's what I want. That's what I like. I want to be not here. I want to be a knight. I want to be an astronaut. You know, et cetera, et cetera. But now here I am, you know, sit all the way down in the chair, I've heard in these meetings, and I like sitting all the way down in the chair. I've really changed in this program. I think a benchmark of the way you take Tom Winia is a reflection of your progress in sobriety. I remember when I first talked with him, he would slowly be telling me something, and I'm like, and then I'd interrupt him because I want to get my point out, you know. But now, you know, that awesome resource we have here in Missoula, like our own, you know, historian or whatever, you know, now it's actually normal to have a conversation with him, and that person who had to interrupt him all the time, he's just not there anymore, you know. And I think I'm almost out of time. I'd just like to mention one last thing. Something that I discovered, I think, maybe it's well known, but there's that phrase that goes around that people say, well, you can either be happy or you can be right. Which would you like? And I said to myself, what fools these mortals be? Clearly, you can be both. I can be right. This is black. Jimmy says it's white. I'll say, okay, I'm right and I'm happy. But clearly, that's not the situations they're talking about, you know? And I realized something, that it is kind of, when I see myself needing to be right, when I see that being important, then I kind of realize this is something I need to check. You know, there is a part of me that is not ready to be happy about this, that is not ready to release this. The rightness is more important to me than being part of a community, than cherishing human emotions, than living the life I want to live, you know? And so I guess I'll just close with that. The most recent thought in this long and beautiful journey I've been having, thanks to all you guys for being a part of my master plan.